The stagecoach lurched to a stop in front of the Red Bluff, California General Store, and Felicity Sutherland pressed a trembling hand against her stomach, feeling the flutter of life beneath her corset that no one could know about yet. She stepped down into the dusty Main Street on that scorching July afternoon in 1878, her traveling dress clinging to her from 3 weeks of relentless heat and endless miles, searching the crowd of curious onlookers for the face of Nathan Vance, the rancher she had agreed to marry through letters exchanged over 6 months. Her secret weighed heavier than any trunk the driver was now unloading, and she wondered if she had made a terrible mistake coming all this way from Boston to become the bride of a man who believed her to be a respectable widow, when the truth was far more complicated. Nathan stood near the hitching post, hat in his hands, his sun-bronzed face showing lines of hard work and honest living that made him look older than his 32 years. He was taller than she had imagined, with broad shoulders that spoke of years working cattle and building something from nothing in this harsh California landscape. His dark hair curled slightly at his collar, and his eyes were the color of the summer sky above them, studying her with an expression that seemed equal parts hope and uncertainty. He took a step forward, then another, until he stood before her with his hat pressed against his chest. "Miss Sutherland," he said, his voice deeper and warmer than she had imagined during all those nights reading his letters by candlelight. "I am Nathan Vance. Welcome to Red Bluff." "Mr. Vance," Felicity replied, trying to keep her voice steady despite the exhaustion threatening to overwhelm her. "Thank you for meeting me." He reached for her hand, not to shake it but to hold it gently, his calloused palm warm against her gloved fingers. "The journey must have been difficult. You look worn out. Let me get your things loaded into the wagon and we can head out to the ranch." "It is about an hour ride, but I have water and some food packed for you." She wanted to protest that she was fine, but the truth was that she felt dizzy and sick, the same nausea that had plagued her for weeks now making her stomach turn. She nodded instead, grateful that he seemed understanding rather than disappointed by her bedraggled appearance. As he moved to collect her trunks, she studied him more carefully, noting the way he moved with easy confidence and the respectful nods he received from the townspeople watching this scene unfold. Whatever else her letters had told her about Nathan Vance, it seemed he was well regarded in this community. The wagon ride out of town took them through rolling golden hills dotted with oak trees, the Sacramento River visible in the distance like a ribbon of silver cutting through the landscape. Nathan kept the horses at a steady pace, not pushing them in the heat, and he pointed out landmarks as they went, his voice filling the silence between them with stories about the land and the challenges of running cattle in this part of California. Felicity tried to focus on his words, but the constant motion of the wagon combined with her condition made it difficult to concentrate on anything except keeping her breakfast down. "Are you feeling all right?" Nathan asked suddenly, his voice sharp with concern. "You have gone pale." "Just the heat and the travel," Felicity said quickly, forcing a smile. "I am not accustomed to such temperatures. Boston rarely gets this warm." He immediately pulled a canteen from beneath the seat and offered it to her. "Drink slowly." "The ranch house has thick adobe walls that keep it cooler inside. My housekeeper, Maria, will have everything ready for you. She has been excited to meet you, preparing for weeks." The mention of a housekeeper brought a flutter of anxiety to Felicity's chest. Another person to fool, another pair of eyes that might see through her carefully constructed story. She had told Nathan in her letters that she was a widow, that her husband had died in a factory accident 2 years prior, leaving her alone and struggling in Boston. She had told him she was 23 years old, respectable, educated, and seeking a fresh start in the West where the past could be left behind. All of that was true except for the most important details. Her husband had indeed died, but only 6 months ago, not 2 years. And she was carrying his child, though he had never known about it before the fever took him. The ranch appeared on the horizon like a promise, a sprawling collection of buildings nestled in a valley with a creek running through it. The main house was indeed built of adobe, whitewashed and solid, with a wide porch that wrapped around 2 sides and provided shade. Corrals and outbuildings spread out behind it, and Felicity could see cattle grazing in the distance, their reddish-brown coats standing out against the golden grass. It was more substantial than she had expected, evidence that Nathan Vance had built something real out here in this remote corner of California. Maria met them at the door, a Mexican woman in her 50s with kind eyes and capable hands that immediately took charge of the situation. She clucked over Felicity's exhausted state like a mother hen, speaking in rapid Spanish to Nathan before switching to accented but clear English. "You bring her inside immediately. She needs water, food, rest. What were you thinking, making her travel in this heat?" "I did not make the stagecoach schedule, Maria," Nathan said with a hint of amusement in his voice. "But you are right. Miss Sutherland needs to rest before we do anything else." Maria guided Felicity through the house, which was surprisingly cool and comfortable despite the heat outside. The main room had high ceilings with exposed beams, simple but sturdy furniture, and windows that let in light while keeping out the worst of the sun. Everything was clean and well maintained, speaking to the care that had gone into making this house a home. Maria led her down a hallway to a bedroom that had clearly been prepared with a woman's comfort in mind. Fresh flowers stood in a vase on the dresser, the bed was made with crisp white linens, and lace curtains hung at the windows. "This is your room until the wedding," Maria said firmly. "Mr. Nathan, he is a good man, very proper. He would not dream of anything inappropriate. You rest now, and I will bring you food and water. Tonight we have a simple dinner, and tomorrow you can see the ranch properly." Left alone in the quiet room, Felicity finally allowed herself to sink onto the bed, her carefully maintained composure crumbling. She pressed both hands against her stomach, feeling the slight swell that her corset still managed to hide. She was perhaps 4 months along, maybe a bit more, and soon it would become impossible to conceal. She had hoped to marry Nathan quickly, within a week or 2 of arriving, so that when the baby came early, people might assume it was premature or simply not count the months too carefully. But looking at his honest face and hearing the warmth in his voice, she felt the weight of her deception like a stone in her chest. Her husband Thomas had been a good man, a clerk who worked long hours to provide for them in their small Boston apartment. They had married when she was 20, and for 2 years they had tried to build a life together despite their limited means. When she finally conceived, she had been overjoyed, planning to tell him the wonderful news after his birthday celebration. But the fever had swept through their neighborhood like wildfire, and Thomas had been one of dozens who died in the span of a week. By the time she recovered from her own illness, she was alone, pregnant, and facing eviction from the apartment she could no longer afford. Her situation had been desperate. A pregnant widow with no family and no means of support faced impossible choices in Boston. The charitable institutions would take her in, but they would take her baby too, placing it in an orphanage while she worked off her debt in a factory or laundry. Her friends from her church had tried to help, but their resources were limited, and the shame of bearing a child so soon after her husband's death had already started whispers. That was when someone had shown her the advertisement for mail-order brides, and she had seen it as the only path forward. She had written to 3 ranchers, and Nathan Vance had been the one who responded with such warmth and kindness in his letters. He had told her about his ranch, about the beauty of California, about his dream of building a family and a legacy in this new land. He had been honest about the hardships, about the isolation and the work, but also about his commitment to treating a wife with respect and care. His letters had been education and thoughtful, revealing a man who read books in his spare time and thought deeply about the world. She had convinced herself that she could make this work, that she could give her child a father and Nathan a wife, and that perhaps her deception was justified by the circumstances. Now, lying in this comfortable bed in his home, surrounded by evidence of his honest character, she felt the full weight of what she had done. He deserved the truth, but telling him the truth meant risking everything she had traveled 3,000 miles to find. A knock on the door interrupted her thoughts, and Maria entered with a tray laden with food and a pitcher of water. "You must eat," she said, setting the tray on the bedside table. "I know the signs of a woman who has not been eating properly. You are too thin, too pale. Whatever troubles you carry, they will be easier to face with a full stomach." Felicity's eyes snapped up to meet Maria's, searching for accusation or suspicion, but found only motherly concern. "I am just tired from the journey." "Of course," Maria said, but her eyes suggested she saw more than she was saying. "Mr. Nathan is a good man. Whatever you need, whatever troubles you have, he will help. He is the kind of man you can trust with difficult things." After Maria left, Felicity ate mechanically, forcing down the simple but nourishing meal of beans, rice, and fresh bread. The food helped settle her stomach, and she felt a bit stronger as she moved to the window to look out at the ranch spread before her. In the distance, she could see Nathan working with several ranch hands, moving cattle from one pasture to another. Even from here, she could see the easy way he moved, the confidence and capability that came from years of hard work. This was his world, built with his own hands and sweat, and she was about to enter it under false pretenses. That evening, dinner was a quiet affair with just the three of them around the large table in the main room. Nathan had cleaned up and changed into fresh clothes, his hair still damp from washing. He asked Felicity polite questions about her journey and her impressions of California, keeping the conversation light and comfortable. He did not press when she gave vague answers about her life in Boston, seeming to understand that some things were difficult to speak about. Maria served the food and occasionally added her own comments, creating an atmosphere that was surprisingly warm and welcoming. "I thought we might have the wedding next Saturday," Nathan said as Maria cleared the plates. "That gives you a week to rest and settle in, to get to know the ranch and the area. The minister from Red Bluff can come out and some of the neighbors would attend." "Unless you would prefer something different," Felicity's heart raced. A week. 7 days to decide whether to tell him the truth or continue the deception. 7 days before she became his wife and bound him to her secret without his knowledge. She looked at his face, so open and hopeful, and felt her resolve waver. "That sounds perfect," she heard herself say. "A week will be good." Over the following days, Felicity settled into the rhythm of ranch life, observing and learning this new world she had entered. Nathan was patient and attentive, showing her around the property and introducing her to the ranch hands who worked for him. There were 5 men who lived in the bunkhouse and worked the cattle, along with Maria and her husband Jose, who maintained the house and gardens. Everyone treated her with respect and a curious kind of interest, clearly pleased that their boss was finally settling down with a wife. The ranch itself was impressive, covering several thousand acres of grazing land with a large herd of cattle that Nathan was preparing to drive to market in the fall. He explained his operation with quiet pride, pointing out improvements he had made and plans he had for expansion. Everything about the way he ran the ranch spoke to his character. He was fair with his workers, careful with his resources, and committed to building something sustainable rather than just chasing quick profits. Felicity found herself drawn to him in ways she had not anticipated. His letters had revealed his mind and character, but being near him in person added dimensions she could not have imagined. The way he laughed at something one of the ranch hands said, throwing his head back with genuine amusement. The gentleness with which he handled a skittish horse, speaking in low, soothing tones until the animal calmed. The consideration he showed in small ways, always making sure she had shade and water when they were outside, never pushing her to do more than she felt comfortable doing. On the third day, they rode out to a high meadow where wildflowers bloomed in patches of purple and gold, and the view stretched for miles in every direction. Nathan helped her dismount, his hands strong and steady at her waist, and they walked together through the grass to a spot beneath a massive oak tree. "This is my favorite place on the ranch," he said, settling onto the ground and inviting her to sit beside him. "When things get hard or confusing, I come up here to think. Something about seeing the world spread out like this helps put things in perspective." Felicity sat carefully, arranging her skirts around her. The breeze was cooler up here, carrying the scent of grass and earth. "It is beautiful. I can see why you love it." He was quiet for a moment, his gaze on the distant mountains. "I want you to know that I understand this is all very sudden and strange for you. We have exchanged letters, but that is not the same as truly knowing someone. I do not expect you to feel anything for me right away, Felicity. I hope that over time, we can build something real together, something based on respect and partnership. I want you to feel like this is your home, not just my ranch that you happen to live on." His words, so sincere and thoughtful, made her chest tighten with emotion. "You have already made me feel more welcome than I had any right to expect. You are a good man, Nathan." "I try to be," he said with a slight smile. "Though I have my faults like anyone. I can be stubborn about how I think things should be done. I spend too much time working and not enough time with other people, and I have been told that I am too serious, that I need to learn to relax more." He turned to look at her directly, his blue eyes searching her face. "But I promise you this. I will always be honest with you, and I will always do my best to take care of you and any family we might have. Whatever challenges we face, we will face them together." The words struck her like a physical blow, so close to what she needed to hear but making her deception feel even worse. "Together," she repeated softly, the word catching in her throat. "Is something wrong?" he asked, noticing her distress. "You look upset." This was the moment. She could tell him everything, trust in the goodness she saw in him, and hope that his promise to face things together extended to the secret she carried. But fear held her tongue. Fear that he would send her away. Fear that he would feel betrayed and tricked. Fear that her child would lose the chance at a father and a home. "I am just overwhelmed," she said finally. "Everything is so different here and you are being so kind. I worry that I will not be the wife you deserve." He reached over and took her hand, his touch gentle but firm. "You do not need to be anyone other than who you are, Felicity. I did not ask for a perfect wife. I asked for a partner, someone willing to build a life with me in this place. From your letters, I believe you are that person. Am I wrong?" "No," she whispered, clutching his hand like a lifeline. "You are not wrong. I want that too." They sat together in the meadow for a long time, talking about smaller things, easier topics. He told her about growing up in Missouri and coming west after the war, about the years of hard work it had taken to buy this land and build the ranch. She told him carefully edited stories about Boston, about missing the ocean and the change of seasons, about her love of reading and her hope to perhaps start a small garden. The conversation flowed more naturally than their previous exchanges, and Felicity felt something shifting between them, a fragile connection beginning to form. That night, she lay in bed with her hands on her stomach, feeling the flutter of movement that was becoming more frequent. "Your father is a good man," she whispered to the child growing inside her. "Not the father you were born from, but the one who will raise you. I have to believe this is the right choice. I have to believe that sometimes deception is necessary for survival, and that love can grow from complicated beginnings." The wedding day arrived with clear skies and temperatures that climbed steadily as the morning progressed. Maria had helped Felicity dress in a simple but elegant gown of pale blue silk that she had brought from Boston, one of the few fine things she had kept from her previous life. The dress still fit, though the waist was becoming snug, and Felicity had to be careful with how she stood and moved to avoid drawing attention to the slight swell of her abdomen. The ceremony took place on the porch of the ranch house, with the minister from Red Bluff presiding and about 20 people in attendance. Nathan wore a new black suit that made him look both handsome and slightly uncomfortable, his collar starched and his boots polished to a shine. When he saw Felicity approaching, his face transformed with a smile that made her heart skip. The vows were traditional and brief, the minister speaking about commitment and partnership in a voice that carried across the assembled guests. When Nathan took her hand and promised to love and cherish her for better or worse, in sickness and health, Felicity felt tears sting her eyes. She repeated her own vows, meaning every word even as the weight of her secret pressed down on her chest. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," the minister said. "You may kiss your bride." Nathan leaned in slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted, and pressed a gentle kiss to her lips. It was brief and chaste, appropriate for the public setting, but Felicity felt warmth spread through her chest at the tenderness of it. When he pulled back, he was smiling, his eyes bright with happiness. The celebration afterward was lively, with Maria and several neighbor women providing an impressive spread of food, and the ranch hands bringing out fiddles and guitars for music. People congratulated them warmly, and Felicity found herself welcomed into the community with an openness that surprised her. Several women promised to visit and help her settle in, offering advice about managing a ranch household and dealing with the challenges of California weather. As the sun began to set and the guests gradually departed, Felicity felt her anxiety rising. She was now Nathan's wife, and the wedding night loomed before her with all its implications. How could she hide her condition in the intimacy of the marriage bed? How could she explain the changes in her body without revealing the truth? Nathan seemed to sense her nervousness as they stood on the porch watching the last wagon depart down the long drive. "Felicity," he said quietly, "I want you to know that I have no expectations for tonight. We barely know each other, regardless of what the law and the church say about us being married. I will not pressure you or force anything. We can take our time getting to know each other properly." Relief and confusion warred in her chest. "But we are married. You have rights." "I have responsibilities," he corrected gently. "My responsibility is to make you feel safe and cared for, not to claim my rights. There is a lifetime ahead of us, Felicity. We do not need to rush into anything you are not ready for." She looked at him, this man who continued to surprise her with his decency, and felt something crack in her carefully maintained walls. "You really are unlike anyone I have ever known." "I will take that as a compliment," he said with a slight smile. "Now, it has been a long day. Why do not you go get some rest, and I will take care of a few things in the barn before I turn in." That night, Felicity lay alone in the bedroom that was now officially hers and Nathan's, listening to the sounds of the ranch settling into silence. She heard him come in much later, his footsteps quiet in the hallway, and then the sound of him settling onto the couch in the main room. He was giving her space, respecting her need for time, and the realization made her want to weep. How had she found such a good man? And how could she continue to deceive him? The answer came 2 weeks later, when her secret became impossible to hide. She had been feeling increasingly unwell, the nausea returning with a vengeance and her energy draining away despite her efforts to maintain a normal appearance. Nathan had noticed, his concern growing as she picked at her meals and grew pale. He had asked several times if she needed to see a doctor, but she had put him off, claiming it was just adjustment to the climate and the different food. That afternoon, she was helping Maria in the kitchen when a wave of dizziness overtook her. She grabbed for the counter but missed, her legs buckling as darkness crept into the edges of her vision. She heard Maria cry out and felt arms catching her before she hit the floor, and then everything went black. When she came to, she was lying on her bed with Maria hovering over her, and Nathan pacing anxiously near the window. The room seemed too bright and she blinked against the light filtering through the curtains. "Thank God," Nathan said, rushing to her side. "You scared us half to death. Maria says you just collapsed." "I am fine," Felicity tried to say, but her voice came out weak and thready. "Just a dizzy spell." "This is more than just a dizzy spell," Nathan said firmly. "You have been unwell for weeks. I am sending Jose to town to fetch the doctor." No arguments. Fear spiked through her, giving her strength to sit up despite Maria's protests. "No, please, you do not need to do that. I just need to rest. Felicity, you are clearly ill. I am not going to stand by and do nothing while my wife suffers." His voice was kind but determined, and she could see there would be no arguing with him. Maria, who had been silent, suddenly spoke up. "Mr. Nathan, perhaps I should speak with Mrs. Felicity alone first. Sometimes women's troubles are delicate matters." Nathan looked between them, clearly wanting to argue but also respecting Maria's wisdom in such things. "All right. But if Maria thinks you need a doctor, Felicity, I am sending for one immediately." After he left, closing the door behind him, Maria sat on the edge of the bed and fixed Felicity with a knowing look. "How far along are you?" The words hung in the air between them, and Felicity felt her carefully constructed world collapsing. "I do not know what you mean. Child, I have raised 6 children of my own and helped birth dozens more. I know what pregnancy looks like, especially when a woman is trying to hide it. You have been sick in the mornings, you are exhausted all the time, and you are starting to show despite that tight corset you insist on wearing." Maria's voice was not unkind, but it was firm. "Does Mr. Nathan know?" Tears spilled down Felicity's cheeks, the relief of finally being able to tell someone warring with the terror of exposure. "No, he does not know. It is my late husband's child. I was already pregnant when I came here." Maria sighed deeply, her expression troubled. "Oh, child. Why did you not tell him? Mr. Nathan is a good man. He would have understood." "Would he?" Felicity asked bitterly. "Would he have agreed to marry a woman carrying another man's child? I had nowhere else to go, Maria. My husband died. I had no family, no money, no options. This was my only chance to give my baby a home and a father. By lying to the man who has shown you nothing but kindness and respect," Maria's words were sharp, "by tricking him into raising a child he believes is his own." "I never said the child would be his," Felicity protested weakly. "I just did not tell him it already existed. That is the same as lying, and you know it." Maria stood and walked to the window, looking out at where Nathan was working in one of the corrals. "You have put me in a terrible position. I have known Mr. Nathan for 7 years, since he first came to this area. He is like a son to me, and now I know he has been deceived, and I must decide whether to keep your secret or tell him the truth." "Please," Felicity begged, her voice breaking, "please do not tell him. Not yet. Let me figure out how to explain. Give me time." Maria turned back to her, her face stern. "I will give you until tomorrow evening. You will tell him the truth yourself, or I will tell him. He deserves to know what he has gotten himself into, and the longer you wait, the worse it will be." She moved toward the door, then paused. "For what it is worth, I think you have misjudged him. Mr. Nathan is a man who values honesty above almost everything else. If you had told him the truth from the beginning, he might have still married you. But discovering you have lied to him will hurt him deeply. You had better pray that his capacity for forgiveness is as large as his heart." After Maria left, Felicity lay in bed feeling as though her world was ending. She had known this moment would come eventually, but she had hoped for more time, hoped to build enough of a foundation with Nathan that he might be able to accept the truth. Instead, she had barely been married 2 weeks, and now everything was about to come crashing down. She spent the rest of the day and night rehearsing what she would say, trying to find words that would make him understand her impossible position. But every scenario she imagined ended with him looking at her with betrayal and anger, with him sending her away or demanding an annulment. By the time morning came, she was exhausted and sick with dread, but she knew Maria was right. Nathan deserved the truth, regardless of what it cost her. She found him after breakfast, working in the barn with one of the horses. He looked up when she entered, and his face immediately showed concern. "You should be resting. Maria said you are still not feeling well. Nathan, I need to talk to you. It is important." Her voice trembled despite her efforts to keep it steady. He set down the curry comb he had been using and gave her his full attention. "All right, what is it?" She took a deep breath, trying to find the courage to begin. "When I wrote to you, when I answered your advertisement, I told you things about myself. Most of it was true, but I left out something very important, something you deserved to know before you married me." His expression grew serious, his blue eyes searching her face. "What did you leave out?" "My husband died 6 months ago, not 2 years ago like I said, and I am pregnant with his child. I was already pregnant when I came here when I married you." The words came out in a rush, and she forced herself to meet his eyes, to not look away from whatever reaction she would see there. Nathan stood very still, his face going carefully blank in a way that was somehow worse than anger would have been. The silence stretched between them, heavy and terrible, and Felicity felt her heart breaking with each passing second. "How far along?" he asked finally, his voice flat. "About 4.5 months. I will start showing obviously in another month or so. I have been wearing tight corsets to hide it, but it will not be possible to hide much longer." He turned away from her, his hands gripping the edge of a stall door until his knuckles turned white. 4.5 months. So you knew before you even wrote to me. Before you answered my advertisement. Every letter, every word you wrote, you knew you were carrying another man's child and you said nothing. "I had no choice," Felicity said desperately. "I was alone, pregnant, with no way to support myself. The only options I had were the poor house or the streets. I needed to give my child a chance at a life. So you lied to me." He still was not looking at her, his voice tight with controlled emotion. "You let me believe you were a respectable widow looking for a fresh start. You let me fall in love with the woman I thought you were, the woman in those letters. But it was all a lie, was it not? Everything you wrote, everything you said was calculated to make me want you." "No." She moved closer, desperate to make him understand. "My feelings were real. Everything I wrote about wanting a partnership, about wanting to build a life, that was all true. I just did not tell you about the pregnancy because I was afraid you would reject me if you knew." "You were right to be afraid," Nathan said harshly, finally turning to face her. "I asked for honesty in my advertisement. I specifically said I valued honesty and trust above all else. And you lied to me from the very first letter." He laughed bitterly. "Was anything true? Or was it all just a performance to trap me into taking care of you and your child?" His words cut like knives, each one deserved but agonizing. "I never wanted to trap you. I just wanted a chance. A chance for my child to have a father and a home. A chance to not be alone and desperate. Is that so terrible?" "What is terrible is that you did not give me the choice." Nathan's control finally broke, his voice rising with anger. "You made decisions that affected both of our lives, and you did it without telling me the truth. How am I supposed to trust anything you say now? How am I supposed to believe that any of this is real?" "I do not know," Felicity whispered, tears streaming down her face. "I do not know how to make this right, but I am telling you the truth now. I am 4.5 months pregnant with my late husband's child. I came here under false pretenses because I was desperate and scared, and I am sorry. I am so sorry." Nathan stared at her for a long moment, his jaw working as he struggled with his emotions. "I need time to think. I need to figure out what to do about this." He moved past her toward the barn door, then paused. "Maria knows, does not she? Is that why she wanted to talk to you alone yesterday?" "Yes. She figured it out and gave me until today to tell you the truth." He nodded slowly. "At least someone around here has some integrity." Then he was gone, striding across the yard toward the pastures, leaving Felicity alone with her tears and her regret. The rest of the day passed in a haze of misery. Felicity stayed in her room, unable to face anyone, while Maria brought her food that went mostly uneaten. Through the window, she could see Nathan working with fierce intensity, pushing himself and the horses harder than necessary, his body language radiating anger and pain. She had done that to him. She had taken his trust and his kindness and repaid it with deception. As evening fell, she heard his footsteps in the house, heard him speaking quietly with Maria in the kitchen. Then the house fell silent, and she assumed he had gone to bed on the couch as he had been doing since their wedding night. She lay in the darkness, one hand on her stomach, feeling the life moving inside her and wondering what would happen now. Would Nathan send her away? Would he demand an annulment? Would he let her stay but treat her with coldness and resentment? The soft knock on her door startled her. "Come in," she called, her voice hoarse from crying. Nathan entered, carrying an oil lamp that cast flickering shadows across his face. He looked exhausted, his hair disheveled and his shirt rumpled, but the rage had left his expression, replaced by something more complex and harder to read. "I have been thinking all day," he said, setting the lamp on the dresser and sitting in the chair by the window. "Trying to figure out what to do, what the right choice is. And I keep coming back to something you said in one of your letters months ago. Do you remember what you wrote about second chances?" Felicity shook her head, not trusting her voice. "You wrote that everyone deserves a second chance, that people are more than their worst moments or their biggest mistakes. You said that out west, people had the opportunity to remake themselves, to become who they were meant to be rather than who circumstances had forced them to be." He leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, his hands clasped. "I have been thinking about those words all day, wondering if you meant them or if they were just more pretty lies to hook me in. But then I thought about my own past, about the things I have done that I am not proud of, the mistakes I have made. And I realized that if I deny you a second chance, I am a hypocrite." "Nathan," she whispered, afraid to hope. "I am not saying this does not hurt," he continued. "It does. It hurts like hell, knowing you did not trust me enough to tell me the truth. It hurts knowing that our entire marriage is built on a lie. But I have also been thinking about what you must have gone through, how desperate you must have been. I cannot imagine what it was like to lose your husband, to find yourself pregnant and alone with no resources and no support. I do not excuse the lying, Felicity, but I think I understand why you did it. He stood and moved to sit on the edge of the bed, close enough to touch but not touching. When I said my vows to you, I meant them, for better or worse, in sickness and health. I did not know exactly what I was agreeing to, but I made those promises nonetheless. And I am not the kind of man who goes back on his word just because things get difficult. What are you saying? Felicity asked, her heart pounding. I am saying that you are my wife, and that child you are carrying is about to become my responsibility, whether it is my blood or not. I am saying that we are going to figure this out together, just like I promised we would face everything together. He finally looked directly at her, his eyes still showing hurt but also determination. But I need you to understand something, Felicity. This is your last chance. No more lies. No more deception. From this point forward, you tell me the truth about everything, even when it is hard, even when you are scared. Can you do that? Yes, she said fervently, reaching for his hand. Yes, I promise. No more lies, no more secrets. I will tell you everything always. He squeezed her hand, his grip firm. Tell me about your husband. Tell me the truth about what happened. So she did. She told him everything, from meeting Thomas when she was 18 to their modest wedding, to their struggles to make ends meet in Boston. She told him about the joy of finally conceiving after 2 years of hoping, about her plans to tell Thomas the news. She told him about the fever epidemic, about watching helplessly as Thomas grew sicker, about his death and her own illness that followed. She told him about waking up alone in a world that had become hostile and frightening, about the shame and judgment she faced as a pregnant widow, about the impossible choices that led her to answer his advertisement. Nathan listened without interruption, his face showing a range of emotions as her story unfolded. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment. I wish you had told me all this from the beginning, he said finally. I would have married you anyway, Felicity. Maybe not as quickly, maybe with more caution, but I would have married you. I asked for a partner, not perfection. I would have understood if you had just trusted me with the truth. I know that now, she said softly, but I was so afraid. I had been rejected and judged by so many people that I could not imagine anyone accepting me and my situation willingly. I thought deception was my only option. It almost cost you everything, Nathan said. If Maria had not forced your hand, how long would you have waited to tell me? Would you have ever told me? Or would you have just let me believe the child was premature? The question stung because she did not know the answer. I wanted to tell you. Every day I wanted to tell you, but the words would not come. I was a coward. You are not a coward, Nathan said, surprising her. You are a woman who did what she thought was necessary to survive and protect her child. I may not agree with your methods, but I cannot fault your motivations. He stood and moved back toward the door, taking the lamp with him. Get some rest. Tomorrow we can talk about what happens next, about how we move forward from here. But tonight, just know that you are not facing this alone anymore. Whatever comes, whatever challenges we have to deal with, we will face them together. I meant what I said in my vows, Felicity, for better or worse. After he left, Felicity lay in the darkness and cried, but this time they were tears of relief rather than despair. She had told him the truth, and he had not sent her away. He was hurt and disappointed, but he was also willing to work through it, willing to keep his promises even when doing so was difficult. She did not deserve such grace, but she would spend the rest of her life trying to be worthy of it. The next few weeks were not easy. Nathan kept his promise to stand by her, but there was a distance between them that had not been there before. He was polite and attentive to her needs, but the warmth and openness he had shown in their early days together was gone, replaced by careful courtesy. They spoke about practical matters, about the ranch and the preparations that would need to be made for the baby's arrival, but they did not talk about feelings or build the emotional intimacy that a marriage needed. Felicity tried to give him space while also showing through her actions that she was committed to being honest and trustworthy. She involved herself in the running of the household, working alongside Maria to preserve food for the winter and maintain the house. She learned to manage the household accounts, keeping careful records and always checking with Nathan before making any significant decisions. She was determined to prove that she could be the partner he had hoped for, even if she had started their marriage on a foundation of lies. The physical changes of her pregnancy became more obvious as the weeks passed, and Felicity stopped trying to hide them. She let out her dresses and stopped wearing the restrictive corsets that had been causing her discomfort. Nathan noticed, but said nothing, his eyes sometimes drifting to her expanding waistline with an expression she could not quite read. One evening in late September, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and gold, Nathan spoke about the baby for the first time since learning the truth. "Have you thought about names?" he asked, his voice casual but his posture tense. Felicity looked at him in surprise. "I have thought about it some. My husband's name was Thomas, so I thought perhaps if it is a boy, that could be a middle name, but I wanted to talk to you about it. You will be raising this child. You should have a say in what we call him or her." Nathan nodded slowly. "I appreciate that, and I have been thinking about something. This child, your child, is going to need a father, a real father, not just someone who tolerates their existence. If I am going to do this, if we are going to make this work, then I need to truly accept this baby as mine. Not in blood, but in every other way that matters." "You would do that?" Felicity asked, her voice thick with emotion. "You would truly accept and love this child?" "I am going to try," Nathan said honestly. "I will not lie and say it is easy, because it is not. Every time I think about you carrying another man's child, it hurts, but I also know that this baby is innocent in all this. This child did not ask to be born into complicated circumstances. And if I am honest with myself, I always wanted children. The fact that this one does not share my blood does not change the fact that they will need a father to teach them and protect them and love them." Felicity reached over and took his hand, grateful when he did not pull away. "You are an extraordinary man, Nathan Vance. I do not deserve your kindness, but I am grateful for it every single day. You deserve kindness, Felicity. Everyone does." He squeezed her hand gently. "And I have been thinking about what you said, about how you were so desperate and afraid that you felt lying was your only option. That situation, that desperation, that was not your fault. You should not have been put in a position where you had to choose between honesty and survival. The world was cruel to you, and I will not add to that cruelty." They sat together in the fading light, hands joined, and Felicity felt the first stirrings of real hope. The distance between them was still there, but it was beginning to close. Nathan was choosing to forgive her, choosing to move forward rather than dwell in the past. It was more than she had any right to ask for, and she was determined not to waste this second chance. As October arrived and the heat of summer gave way to cooler autumn temperatures, the relationship between Nathan and Felicity continued to evolve. The careful courtesy gradually warmed into something more genuine, and they began to have the kinds of conversations they had shared in their letters, deep discussions about books and ideas and dreams for the future. Nathan started including her in decisions about the ranch, asking for her opinions and listening to her suggestions. She, in turn, worked to show him that she was trustworthy, that her word could be relied upon, that she was committed to building a real partnership. One morning in mid-October, Nathan came to find her in the kitchen where she was helping Maria prepare preserves. "I need to make a trip into Red Bluff to meet with some buyers for the cattle. Do you want to come with me? We could make a day of it, maybe have lunch at the hotel, look around the shops. You have barely been off the ranch since you arrived." Felicity hesitated, self-conscious about her now obviously pregnant state. "Are you certain? People will see and there will be talk." "Let them talk," Nathan said firmly. "You are my wife. You are carrying a child that will bear my name. Anyone who has a problem with that can keep their opinions to themselves." He smiled slightly. "Besides, I would like to have your company. We can get some things you might need for the baby while we are in town." The trip to Red Bluff was surprisingly enjoyable. Nathan was relaxed and attentive, pointing out landmarks and telling her stories about the area as they drove the wagon into town. When they arrived, he helped her down with careful courtesy and offered his arm as they walked down the main street. People stared, of course, but Nathan met their curious looks with calm confidence, making it clear that he was proud to be seen with his pregnant wife. They had lunch at the hotel restaurant, where Nathan was greeted warmly by several business associates who congratulated him on his marriage. Felicity found herself introduced to various townspeople, all of whom treated her with respect, though she could see the speculation in some eyes as they calculated how far along she was and how recently the wedding had taken place. She held her head high, refusing to be ashamed, drawing strength from Nathan's solid presence beside her. After lunch, they visited the general store where Nathan purchased supplies for the ranch and helped Felicity select fabric for baby clothes and blankets. He was surprisingly interested in the choices, asking questions about what would be most practical and durable. As they looked at the tiny gowns and soft blankets, Felicity saw his expression soften, some of the lingering hurt finally fading from his eyes. "It is becoming real," he said quietly as they loaded their purchases into the wagon. "Before, it was all abstract, something I was dealing with intellectually. But seeing those little clothes, thinking about an actual baby in our house, it is starting to feel real." "How does that make you feel?" Felicity asked carefully. He was quiet for a moment, considering. "Scared, excited, still a bit hurt when I think about everything. But mostly I think I am ready. I want to be a father, Felicity. I want to teach this child about ranching and horses and the land. I want to show them the meadow up on the hill where the wildflowers bloom. I want to be the kind of father who is present and involved, not distant and harsh like my own father was." "You will be," Felicity said with conviction. "You will be a wonderful father." The drive back to the ranch was peaceful, the afternoon sun warming them as the wagon rolled through the golden hills. Nathan started talking about improvements he wanted to make to the house, including adding another bedroom for the baby and perhaps eventually more children. The easy way, he said, more children made Felicity's heart soar. He was thinking about a future together, about building a family, about all the things she had hoped for when she first answered his advertisement. That night, after everyone else had gone to bed, Nathan knocked on her door again. When she invited him in, he stood awkwardly in the doorway, as if uncertain about his welcome. "I have been sleeping on the couch for over 2 months now," he said, "and my back is reminding me that I am not as young as I used to be. This is as much your room as mine, and you are my wife." "Would you mind if I slept in my own bed?" Felicity's pulse quickened. "I would not mind. This is your house, Nathan. You should not have to be uncomfortable in your own home." He nodded and went to change, returning a few minutes later in his nightshirt. The bed was large enough that they could lie without touching, but Felicity was acutely aware of his presence as he settled onto his side. They lay in the darkness for a while, not speaking, and she wondered if he was as nervous as she was. "Felicity," he said finally, his voice soft in the darkness, "I want you to know that I am not expecting anything. We are still finding our way with each other, and I will not rush you into anything you are not ready for." "I know," she said. "You have been more patient and understanding than I had any right to hope for." She hesitated, then added, "But I am your wife, Nathan, truly your wife, not just in name. When you are ready, when we both are ready, I want that to be real between us too." She heard him shift, felt the mattress move as he turned toward her. "I think I am falling in love with you," he said quietly. "Not the woman I imagined from the letters, but the real you. The woman who made terrible choices because she was desperate to protect her child. The woman who works hard and does not complain. The woman who is braver than she gives herself credit for. I am falling in love with that woman." Tears slid down Felicity's cheeks as she turned to face him in the darkness. "I am already in love with you," she whispered. "I think I started falling in love with your letters, with your honesty and your dreams. And then I met you, and you were even better than I had imagined. I know I hurt you with my deception, and I will regret that for the rest of my life. But I love you, Nathan. I love you with everything I am." He reached across the space between them and pulled her close, careful of her rounded stomach, and kissed her with a tenderness that made her heart ache. It was different from the brief kiss at their wedding, deeper and more meaningful, full of promise and possibility. When he pulled back, he rested his forehead against hers. "Whatever this baby turns out to be, whatever they look like, I am going to love them," he said firmly. "Because they are part of you and because I choose to be their father. And we are going to make this work, Felicity. We are going to build something real and lasting together." That night, they slept in each other's arms for the first time, and Felicity felt truly safe for the first time since Thomas had died. She had found something she thought was lost forever: a home, a partner, and hope for the future. The weeks that followed brought a new level of intimacy and connection to their marriage. Nathan was increasingly affectionate, often reaching for her hand or dropping a kiss on her forehead as he passed. He talked to her about the ranch operations, including her in decisions and valuing her input. And he began to show interest in the baby, pressing his hand to her stomach, to feel the movements and reading books about infant care that he had ordered from San Francisco. In early November, as the first rains of the season began to fall, Nathan surprised her by unveiling the newly finished nursery. He had worked with Jose to add a room adjacent to their bedroom, with windows that looked out over the ranch, and walls painted a soft yellow that caught the light beautifully. There was a cradle that he had built himself, along with a dresser and a rocking chair that had belonged to his mother. "I wanted the baby to have their own space," he explained as Felicity stood in the doorway with tears streaming down her face. "A place that is just theirs, where they will be safe and loved." She threw her arms around him, overcome with gratitude and love. "It is perfect. You are perfect. I do not know how I got so lucky to find you." "I think we found each other," Nathan said, holding her close. "And maybe that is what matters. Not how we started, but where we are now and where we are going together." As November turned to December and Felicity grew larger and more uncomfortable, Nathan became increasingly protective and attentive. He insisted she rest frequently, brought her tea and meals, and rubbed her aching feet in the evenings while they sat by the fire. Maria teased him about being an over-anxious, expectant father, but Felicity could see the genuine care behind his actions. On a cold night in mid-December, Felicity woke with a sharp pain in her lower back. She lay still, wondering if it was just another pregnancy discomfort, but then another pain came, wrapping around her middle like a band. She reached over and shook Nathan's shoulder. "I think the baby is coming," she whispered. Nathan was instantly awake and alert. He lit the lamp and helped her sit up, his hands gentle but his face showing his concern. "Are you certain? How far apart are the pains?" "I am certain," Felicity said as another contraction made her gasp. "They are close together. This baby is in a hurry." Nathan jumped out of bed and pulled on his clothes quickly. "I am going to get Maria and send Jose for the midwife. Everything is going to be fine, Felicity. You are strong and healthy, and women have babies all the time." Despite the reassuring words, Felicity could see the fear in his eyes. This was their first test as a couple facing something difficult together, and she drew strength from his presence even as the pains grew stronger. Maria arrived quickly, taking charge of the situation with calm efficiency. She got Felicity out of bed and walking, explaining that movement would help the labor progress. Nathan hovered anxiously until Maria finally ordered him to go boil water and gather clean linens, giving him something productive to do rather than just worry. The labor was long and difficult, lasting through the night and into the next day. Felicity had never experienced such pain, never imagined the sheer exhausting work of bringing a child into the world. But through it all, Nathan was there, holding her hand during contractions, wiping her face with cool cloths, speaking words of encouragement and love. When she wanted to give up, when the pain seemed unbearable, he was the steady presence that kept her going. Finally, as the sun was setting on the second day, the midwife announced that it was time to push. Felicity bore down with all her remaining strength, feeling as though she was being torn apart. And then suddenly there was a rush of relief, and the sharp cry of a newborn filled the room. "A boy," the midwife announced, wrapping the baby in a clean blanket. "A healthy, loud boy." Maria cleaned the baby and then placed him in Felicity's arms. He was red-faced and angry, his tiny fists waving as he cried, but to Felicity, he was the most beautiful thing she had ever seen. She looked up at Nathan, who stood beside the bed with tears streaming down his face. "You want to hold your son?" she asked softly. Nathan reached down with trembling hands and took the baby, cradling him awkwardly but with infinite gentleness. The baby quieted, his dark eyes seeming to focus on Nathan's face, and something profound passed between them. When Nathan looked up, his expression was transformed with wonder and fierce love. "Hello, little one," he whispered. "Welcome to the world. I am your father, and I am going to love you and protect you for as long as I live." Felicity watched through tears as Nathan bonded with the child that was not his by blood, but was becoming his in every way that mattered. She had been so afraid that he would resent the baby, that seeing another man's child would reopen old wounds. But instead, she saw only love and acceptance and the beginning of something beautiful. "What should we name him?" Nathan asked, still gazing at the baby in his arms. "I was thinking about your middle name," Felicity said. "You told me once that it was James after your grandfather. What if we called him James Thomas? James for your family, Thomas for his birth father, so he will always know where he came from." Nathan looked at her with such love and gratitude that her heart felt too full for her chest. "James Thomas Vance. It is perfect." He leaned down and kissed her forehead. "Thank you for him, Felicity. Thank you for being brave enough to come out here, even under false pretenses. Thank you for giving me the chance to be a father. Thank you for forgiving me," she whispered. "Thank you for choosing love over hurt, for giving me a second chance." "We gave each other a second chance," Nathan said, "and look what we made together. Not just this baby, but a real marriage, a real family. This is just the beginning, Felicity. We have our whole lives ahead of us to build something beautiful." The weeks after James's birth were exhausting but joyful. Nathan threw himself into fatherhood with enthusiasm, learning to change diapers and soothe a crying baby with the same determination he brought to everything else. He would walk the floor with James in the middle of the night, singing off-key lullabies and telling the baby stories about the ranch. Felicity watched him fall deeper in love with their son, and she fell deeper in love with Nathan, seeing the gentle, patient man he became with a baby in his arms. As winter gave way to spring and James grew from a tiny newborn into a chubby, smiling infant, the last shadows of their rocky beginning finally faded away. Nathan no longer saw James as another man's child, but simply as his son. And Felicity no longer carried the weight of her deception, having been fully forgiven and fully accepted into her husband's heart. One warm evening in April, as they sat on the porch watching James play on a blanket while the sun set over the ranch, Nathan pulled Felicity close and kissed her temple. "I have been thinking," he said. "James is going to need siblings. Brothers and sisters to grow up with, to help him run this ranch someday. What do you think about expanding our family?" Felicity smiled and placed his hand on her stomach, where a new life had recently begun to make itself known. "I think that is an excellent idea. In fact, I think it has already started happening." Nathan's eyes widened, and then he laughed with pure joy, picking her up and spinning her around despite her protests. "Another baby? Are you certain?" "I am certain," she said, laughing at his excitement. "You are going to be a father again, Nathan Vance. What do you think about that?" "I think I am the luckiest man alive," he said, setting her down gently and pulling her into a deep kiss. "I think that mail-order bride advertisement was the best decision I ever made. I think that your secret brought us together in ways we never could have predicted. And I think that whatever comes next, whatever challenges we face, we are going to face them together, just like I promised." As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky and James babbled happily on his blanket, Felicity leaned against her husband's solid warmth and felt complete. She had come to California desperate and afraid, carrying secrets that threatened to destroy any chance at happiness. But she had found something better than she had ever dared to hope for. A man who could forgive, a love built on honesty and trust, and a family that would grow and thrive in this beautiful, wild place. The years that followed brought both joy and challenges to the Vance Ranch. Their second child, a daughter they named Sarah, was born in December of 1879, with Nathan even more confident and involved in the birth than he had been with James. The little girl had her father's blue eyes and her mother's dark hair, and Nathan doted on her shamelessly, declaring that he was hopelessly in love with his daughter from the moment she entered the world. As James grew into a curious, energetic toddler, Nathan taught him about the ranch, carrying him on his shoulders as he worked with the cattle and horses. The boy showed an early affinity for animals, fearlessly approaching even the largest horses with outstretched hands and delighted laughter. Nathan was patient and encouraging, fostering James's natural inclinations while also teaching him to be careful and respectful of the creatures in their care. In 1881, a third child joined the family, another boy they named Benjamin. He was quieter than James had been, more contemplative, with a serious expression that reminded Felicity of Nathan when he was deep in thought. The family was growing, and the ranch house rang with the sounds of children's laughter and occasional tears, the chaos and joy of a young family building a life together. Through it all, Nathan never once treated James differently than he treated Sarah or Benjamin. He was equally devoted to all three children, and James never had reason to doubt that Nathan was his father in every meaningful way. On James's 5th birthday, Nathan took him aside for a private conversation while Felicity watched nervously from the kitchen window. "Your mother and I want you to know something," Nathan said, kneeling to be at eye level with the boy. "You had another father before me, a man named Thomas who loved you very much even though he never got to meet you. He died before you were born, and that is a sad thing. But I want you to know that I chose to be your father, James. I chose to love you and raise you, and that makes you my son just as much as Benjamin or Sarah are my children. Do you understand?" James, who had inherited his biological father's dark coloring but had Nathan's steady gaze, nodded seriously. "You are my papa," he said simply. "You have always been my papa." Nathan pulled the boy into a fierce hug, his eyes wet with tears. "That is right. I am your papa, and you are my son, and nothing will ever change that." Watching from the window, Felicity wiped away her own tears, grateful beyond words for the man who had taken her desperate gamble and transformed it into something beautiful and lasting. As the children grew, the ranch prospered. Nathan's careful management and hard work paid off, and he was able to expand his holdings and increase his herd. The cattle drives each fall became major events, with Nathan taking James along starting when the boy was 7, teaching him the skills he would need to one day run the ranch himself. Felicity managed the household with Maria's continued help, but she also became involved in the business side of the operation, keeping the books and handling correspondence with buyers. The community of Red Bluff grew and changed around them, bringing new families and new opportunities. Felicity made friends among the other ranch wives, women who understood the unique challenges of building a life in this rugged place. She never told anyone outside of Maria and Nathan the truth about James's parentage, and as the years passed, it became simply a part of their family history rather than a shameful secret. In 1884, a 4th child was born, another daughter they named Catherine. She was tiny and delicate, worrying Felicity and Nathan with her fragile appearance, but she proved to be tougher than she looked, thriving despite her small size. With 4 children ranging from infant to 8 years old, the house was constantly full of noise and activity, but Nathan and Felicity would not have had it any other way. One evening that summer, after all the children had finally been tucked into bed and the house was quiet, Nathan and Felicity sat on the porch as they had so many times before, watching the stars appear in the darkening sky. "You ever think about how different things could have been?" Nathan asked, his arm around Felicity's shoulders. "If you had not answered my advertisement, if you had made different choices?" "Sometimes," Felicity admitted, "but I cannot imagine any other life now. This is where I was meant to be with you and our children. Even the difficult parts, even the mistakes I made, they all led us here." "I used to be angry about the deception," Nathan said thoughtfully. "For a long time I struggled with feeling like I had been tricked, but I realized something over the years. You did not trick me into loving you. The woman I fell in love with through those letters, she was real. Maybe you left out important information, but your heart, your character, your dreams, those were all genuine, and that is what I fell in love with." Felicity turned to face him, seeing the man he had become over their years together. He was graying slightly at the temples now, and new lines had appeared around his eyes from squinting into the sun, but he was still the same honest, principled man who had stood in that dusty street and welcomed her to Red Bluff all those years ago. "I fell in love with your honesty," she said. "With your integrity and your kindness. I spent so much time being afraid of your reaction when you learned the truth because I knew how much you valued honesty. But you also valued forgiveness and second chances, and those qualities saved us both." "We saved each other," Nathan corrected gently. You gave me a family and a purpose beyond just building a successful ranch. And I gave you a home and safety and love. We were both looking for something, and we found it in each other." As they sat together in the comfortable silence of long companionship, Felicity reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. She had arrived in Red Bluff 8 years ago, desperate and terrified, carrying secrets that threatened to destroy any chance at happiness. She had deceived a good man and nearly lost everything because of it. But she had also found courage she did not know she possessed, had learned that love could overcome even serious mistakes, and had built a family and a life beyond her wildest dreams. The ranch continued to thrive over the next decade, becoming one of the most successful operations in the Red Bluff area. James grew into a capable young man who shared Nathan's love for the land and his skill with horses. He was 16 now, tall and strong, taking on more responsibility with the cattle and proving himself to be a natural leader. Sarah, at 14, had inherited her mother's intelligence and her father's determination, and she was already talking about becoming a teacher. Benjamin, at 12, was the dreamer of the family, more interested in books and drawing than ranching. But Nathan encouraged all his interests, believing each child should follow their own path. Catherine, at 10, was the wild one, fearless and adventurous, always getting into scrapes that left her mother gray-haired with worry. In 1894, Nathan and Felicity celebrated their 16th anniversary with a party that brought together neighbors and friends from across the region. As Felicity looked around at the gathering, at her grown and growing children, at the community they had become part of, at Nathan standing across the yard laughing at something Jose had said, she felt overwhelmed with gratitude. Maria, now in her 70s but still sharp and active, came to stand beside her. "You have built something beautiful here," the older woman said. "I remember when you arrived, so scared and desperate, and I remember telling you that you had to tell Mr. Nathan the truth. I was so angry with you then, so worried about what your lies would do to him." "I remember," Felicity said softly. "You were right to be angry. I put him in an impossible position. But you also gave him everything he ever wanted," Maria continued. "A family, children, a partner who loves him. Yes, you started with deception, but you built something real and lasting. And that matters more than how it began." That night, after the guests had departed and the children were asleep, Nathan found Felicity in the nursery that had long since been converted to a sewing room. She was working on a quilt, piecing together scraps of fabric from clothes the children had outgrown, creating something new and beautiful from the remnants of the past. "That is going to be stunning," Nathan said, coming to stand behind her and wrapping his arms around her waist. "You have such a gift for taking broken pieces and making them into something whole." "I had a good teacher," Felicity said, leaning back against him. "You taught me that broken things can be mended, that mistakes can be forgiven, that new beginnings are possible even when the past is complicated." "We taught each other," Nathan said, kissing the top of her head. "And we built this together. This family, this ranch, this life. It is ours, Felicity. Whatever happened in the past, whatever secrets or lies or pain, we worked through it together. And we will keep working through whatever comes next, just like I promised on that first day. Whatever it is, we will face it together." As they stood together in the quiet house, surrounded by evidence of the life they had built, Felicity thought about the scared young woman who had stepped off that stagecoach 16 years ago. She had been so afraid, so desperate, so certain that deception was her only path to survival. She had been wrong about needing to lie, but she had been right about one thing. Nathan Vance was exactly the man she needed, the partner she had been seeking, the father her child deserved. Their story had not had a perfect beginning, but it had become something beautiful despite that. They had faced challenges together, had worked through hurt and betrayal to find forgiveness and love. They had built a family that was strong and close, children who knew they were loved and valued. They had created a legacy that would continue long after they were gone, rooted in this California soil and nourished by the love they had fought so hard to build. James married at 21, bringing home a strong, capable young woman named Emma who fit seamlessly into the family. A year later, they made Nathan and Felicity grandparents for the first time with the birth of a son they named Nathan James, continuing the family tradition. Sarah pursued her dream of teaching, opening a small school in Red Bluff where she educated the children of ranchers and townspeople alike. Benjamin surprised everyone by becoming a successful artist. His paintings of the California landscape selling in galleries as far away as San Francisco. And Catherine, true to her adventurous spirit, became one of the first women in the area to learn to ride in rodeos, winning prizes and breaking expectations. Through all of it, Nathan and Felicity remained the steady center of their growing family. They celebrated births and mourned losses, supported their children's dreams and picked them up when they fell. They continued to work the ranch side by side, partners in every sense of the word, their love deepening with each passing year. On their 25th anniversary in 1903, Nathan surprised Felicity with a trip back to the meadow where he had first told her they would face everything together. They rode up on horseback, both of them showing the effects of age but still strong and capable. The wildflowers were in bloom, painting the landscape in vibrant colors, and the view was just as spectacular as Felicity remembered. "I wanted to come back here," Nathan said as they stood together under the ancient oak tree. "To the place where I made you promises about facing life together. I wanted to tell you that I would make those same promises again, knowing everything I know now. I would choose you again, Felicity, every single time." Felicity turned to him, this man who had given her everything, who had forgiven her worst mistakes and loved her best self. "I would choose you too," she said. "Even knowing all the pain and complications, I would still get on that stagecoach and come to Red Bluff. Because you are my home, Nathan. You always have been." They stood together in the meadow as the sun moved across the sky. Two people who had found each other through chance and choice, who had built something lasting from a foundation that could have crumbled. Their story had started with a secret and a desperate gamble, but it had become a testament to the power of forgiveness, the strength of commitment, and the transforming nature of love. As they rode back down to the ranch, their hands occasionally brushing as they guided their horses, Felicity thought about all the moments that had brought them to this place. The fear and desperation that had driven her to deception. The hurt and anger Nathan had felt upon learning the truth. The choice he had made to forgive and move forward. The years of building trust and intimacy. The children and grandchildren they had created together. The life they had made from nothing but hope and determination. It had not been an easy journey, but it had been worth every difficult step. And as she looked at Nathan riding beside her, his face weathered by years of sun and wind but his eyes still bright with love when he looked at her, Felicity knew that she was exactly where she was meant to be. The years continued to pass, bringing new challenges and new joys. They weathered droughts and harsh winters, celebrated the births of more grandchildren, and mourned the loss of dear friends including Maria who passed peacefully at the age of 87. Through it all, Nathan and Felicity remained devoted to each other and to the family they had built. As they entered their 70s, they gradually turned over more of the ranch operations to James and Emma, who were raising their own children in the same house where their father had grown up. Nathan and Felicity remained active and involved, but they also took time to enjoy the fruits of their decades of labor. They traveled occasionally, visiting Benjamin in San Francisco to see his latest art show, or attending one of Catherine's rodeo competitions. But they always returned to the ranch, to the land that had become so deeply woven into their identities. On a warm summer evening in 1915, nearly 40 years after Felicity first arrived in Red Bluff, she and Nathan sat on their porch watching their great-grandchildren play in the yard. The house had been expanded and updated over the years, but the porch remained the same, the place where they had shared countless conversations and built the foundation of their relationship. "You remember the first time we sat here together?" Nathan asked, his hand finding hers as naturally as breathing. "You had just arrived, exhausted and sick from the journey, hiding a secret you were terrified to tell." "I remember being so afraid," Felicity said. "Afraid you would discover the truth and send me away. Afraid I had made a terrible mistake. Afraid I would never find a place where I belonged." "And now," Nathan asked with a smile, "now I know that I belong here with you, with our family. Now I know that the best decisions sometimes start with the worst reasons, and that love can redeem even our most desperate acts. Now I know that you meant what you said all those years ago, about facing everything together." She squeezed his hand gently. "We have faced so much together, Nathan. And we have built something that will last long after we are gone." Nathan lifted her hand to his lips and kissed it tenderly. "I love you, Felicity Vance. I have loved you since before I understood what love really meant. I loved the woman in the letters, but I fell in love with the real woman with all her flaws and fears and fierce determination. You made me a better man, gave me a better life than I ever dreamed possible. You saved me," Felicity said simply. "When I was drowning in desperation and fear, you threw me a lifeline. And then you taught me how to swim on my own. You gave me strength I did not know I had, and love I never thought I deserved." As the sun set over the ranch they had built together, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Nathan and Felicity sat in comfortable silence. Their journey had begun with a mail-order bride carrying a secret, with deception and fear threatening to destroy any chance at happiness. But it had become a love story for the ages, a testament to the power of forgiveness and the strength of choosing love even when it is difficult. James approached the porch, his oldest son perched on his shoulders. "Mama, Papa, we are going to head back to our place for the night. The children are getting tired." "Of course, son," Nathan said, standing to embrace his boy, now a man in his 40s with children and grandchildren of his own. "Come back tomorrow for Sunday dinner. Your mother is making that roast you love." After James and his family departed, and the other children and grandchildren had scattered to their own homes, Nathan and Felicity remained on the porch. The stars were beginning to appear, the same stars that had looked down on them through all their years together. "Whatever comes next," Nathan said, echoing the words he had spoken so many times over the decades, "we will face it together." "Together," Felicity agreed, leaning against the man who had been her partner, her love, her home for nearly 40 years. "Always together." And as the night deepened around them and the sounds of the ranch settled into peaceful quiet, they sat hand in hand, two people who had found in each other everything they had been searching for and so much more. Their story had started with a secret and a lie, but it had become the truest, most honest love either of them had ever known. It was a love built on forgiveness and trust, strengthened by trials and sweetened by years of partnership. It was a love that had created a family, built a legacy, and proved that sometimes the most beautiful beginnings come from the most desperate circumstances. The mail-order bride who had arrived with a secret had found not just a home, but a true partner who meant it when he said they would face everything together. And face it together they had, building a life and a love that would echo through generations, a testament to the transforming power of choosing love over fear, forgiveness over anger, and partnership over pride. It was, in the end, exactly the happy ending both of them had been searching for, even when they had not known quite what they were looking for. They had found it in each other, and that made all the difference.